Hi everyone, I'm Rebecca Keppel and I'm here for the April 2017 edition of Stash Bash. It's a fun little YouTube hop where a bunch of us crafters get together and we pick a different supply each month and we decide to bash our stash of that supply. This month it is pattern paper, and we had a fun little twist where we're supposed to use one pattern paper at least of a company that's no longer in its existence. So I chose my paper from Scenic Route. I got rid of most of my pattern paper that I don't use anymore, but this one I've been hoarding. So I also have a bunch of 6x6 pieces of paper that I have die cut or punched out pieces, and I'm going to use those and get rid of those as well. Instead of keeping all those little scraps, I'm going to try and get rid of this stash of little pattern papers. So I've grabbed out a square punch and I'm just punching a bunch of different colors, and I'm going to use that Scenic Route paper to be my 12x12 background. I have my photo already picked out, and I'm just going through and pulling out the little strips that I can't get that square punched out of. I'm going to use the smaller butterfly punch on those strips. So I'm really just collecting a bunch of different colors and patterns here. At this point, I'm not really worrying about what is next to each other, except for I don't want a diagonal stripe next to a diagonal stripe, that kind of thing. And I don't necessarily want two blues next to each other. So I am thinking about it a little bit just to make sure that I have enough squares of different colors, but you'll see that I move things around quite a bit. That one that I tucked behind the photo, I didn't have quite enough of the pattern paper to punch the whole square. So I made do and punched about 3/4 of the square, and I'm just going to tuck it behind the photo. So that one kind of has to stay there. Otherwise, it will look very funny. Now I have most of my squares done, and I again have to move them around a little bit just to avoid lots of doubling up. Now it's time to go in and make some coordinating butterflies. I love this little Martha Stewart butterfly punch. I got it years ago. I haven't used it in a long time, but I used to use it all the time. And I just thought it would be really fun to have a slightly different pattern paper butterfly on top of that pattern paper square. So I'm going through and pulling out some of the smaller strips that I couldn't get a entire square punched out of and using those to punch out the pattern paper butterflies. So I think punches is a really good tool to use when you're trying to use up especially scraps of pattern paper. So next I am just finishing up a couple more butterflies. I need here a few purples, and I was kind of lacking in choices. So it turns out that the Queen & Co. 6x6 pattern paper is double-sided, which is genius. I love that. So you have the large dots on one side and then the small dots on the other side. It makes it a lot easier when you're trying to go for two different looks. Now I went to my sewing machine and I used some metallic silver thread. This is from Coats & Clark. They had it at Joann's for buy one get one free, so I got gold too. But I just stitched down the middle of the butterfly, and the first time I did it, I ended up with a tail at the bottom. And then I realized if I ended up with the stitching at the top and cut the tail a little bit longer, it would look like antenna. So I ended up doing that for the rest of them. The first few, not so much, but that's okay. You can't really tell, especially from far away. It's hard to see exactly what's going on there. So now I'm trying to figure out, this is obviously a grid design layout, but I'm trying to figure out if I want the grid completely centered to the 12x12 page or if I want a large margin on the bottom. And at first I'm thinking for sure it's going to be centered, and then I realize, first of all, there's no room for a title or anything else. And second of all, I really like when you have a grid layout to do something that is not static to the grid, to bust out of the grid a little bit. So by having the grid be in the upper portion of the page, I think that really helps to give it a little bit more of a dynamic feel. And then I have my photo there, and I just need to remember to cover up that one purple square that is not exactly an entire square. So I'm just going to flip the whole page over so I can start really lining up my squares with butterflies. It's pretty easy to do this on this paper because the background is a grid. So it's simple enough I don't need to bring out my T-ruler or anything like that. I can just use the grid from the Scenic Route paper. And I'm using Memory Runner XL, which is a thermoweb tape runner, and I'm making sure to put a little bit of adhesive right on the back of the stitching there. And I do that because it's slightly raised off of the paper. So if I just put adhesive on the paper, the middle might not stick down, and then you could get some, pieces falling apart or falling off or whatever. Also, I like doing that when I have stitching, especially when I'm just doing a little bit of stitching in the middle of a piece like this, because sometimes it can unravel a little bit. And so if I put a little bit of adhesive back there, it's less likely to unravel on me. So now I'm going through and just making sure everything is straight as far as rows and lines and all my squares, and this way I can then go ahead and add my photo and my title at the bottom. And I'm not going to do journaling this time. I'm just going to have those two things. So just a couple more squares to adhere. And like I said, if you have any of this Scenic Route paper, I actually bought it, gosh, this was like years ago that I purchased this. It was when they were going out of business and they sold a bunch of stuff. It was chipboard and pattern paper, just a bunch of things for a huge discount, and I just stocked up because I love this. Both this one that they had, and then they also had a lined 12 by 12 background that I thought was so awesome. So I really miss them. Now it's time to crop down my photo and to mat it on some black cardstock. You can see I pretty much did a tight crop there on the sides and on the top. I think it makes it a better photo for this layout. And I'm going to put the photo at an angle, again, to bust out of the grid so that it's not completely static. The next thing I did was grab some thickers. I'm going with the black foam thickers. I've had these for a while, and I noticed that I was having a lot of trouble removing them from the adhesive backing there. I've never had that happen with thickers. I remember a long time ago, foam thickers used to lose their adhesive, and so they would all kind of fall to the bottom of the package. This I've never had happen. It was almost like it hardened to the paper, and I was really struggling to pull them off without losing their shape. But eventually I did get them off, and surprisingly there was enough adhesive behind them to keep them on the layout, even though it seemed to me you can see the little bits of the heart and the we there, it's losing some of the foam to the adhesive backing, but it ended up working out fine. It was just a little more work than normal to remove from the adhesive backing there. The here was actually the hardest part because I was afraid I was going to warp the shape of the sentiment, and that happens to me a lot with foam, but it ended up actually being just fine. So the next thing I decided to do was add some sequins to some of the squares. I felt like they were kind of boring and missing something, even though I liked the different patterns and such. So I pulled out a few different sequins. These are all from Queen & Co. And I am just laying them on the squares for now, just to get a feel for how many I really want out. I don't want a ton, just here and there, maybe 2 or 3 at the most, 4 on a square. It gives it a little sparkle and shine, gives it a little extra dimension. So I grabbed some purples, some oranges, some blues, and some pinks. And this sequin mix from Queen & Co., they have traditional sequins, they have little hearts, flowers, and stars. So there was a good mix of shapes. And to adhere these to the paper, I am using Thermoweb's iCraft Mixed Media Adhesive. This is a permanent adhesive and it dries clear, which is great because you just need to put a little dot on your paper and then lay the sequin on top. And if some smushes out the side, you're not going to see it because it does dry clear. So, and the other great thing is because it's white, you can see exactly where you're placing it. So it's nice that it starts white and then dries clear. So I'm moving around the page and just adding some here and there. I started with 3 on most squares, but I didn't want them all to have 3 because I felt like that was getting too similar. So some of them have 2, a couple of them have 1. I even ended up putting one right on a butterfly, and I really like the way that this kind of adds some interest to some of these squares. So between the sparkly metallic thread and then the shine from the sequins, it gives a little bit of punch to the pattern paper, which it can be sort of flat if you're not doing something extra special to it. I think the stitching down the middle of the butterflies also adds some extra interest because you can lift up the wings to have them take flight off the squares of your layout. So there's just some extra dimension there as well. This pretty much completes my layout for the 2017 April Stash Bash of pattern paper. So now on to the giveaway. This month, my giveaway is open to everyone, international and domestic US, because it is a gift card. It's a $10 gift card to Simon Says Stamp. Now, I realize that's not a lot, but at least it will help you with your shipping or cover it if you are domestic US. So what you need to do is to subscribe to my YouTube channel and leave a comment down below. Make sure that your email is accessible to me. So if you need to leave it in the comment, do that. Or if your YouTube channel has a link to your email, however, I can find a way to contact you because I've had trouble reaching winners in the past. So the next thing you want to do is go on over to Audrey's YouTube channel. I'm going to link that down below and right up here in the video here. And she's going to show you another layout. Her layouts are absolutely amazing. I'm sure she works with pattern paper beautifully as well. So thank you so much for stopping by, and I'll see you next time.